Hi there. Thanks for dropping into my shop. I got a couple of stickers this week to put on my wall. One of them came in the mail from the US from Doug at Pohl Productions. Now if you haven't seen Doug, he's not just a turner, he's also an entertainer. Seems to specialize a lot in resins, so if that interests you, I hope you'll check him out. I'll put a link in the description box down below this video so you can find him. And I got a second one, a virtual sticker from Will at Will Makes Everything. Will is out of the UK, relatively new to YouTube, been doing some great work. He's I think a young looking fella. Of course, according to my wife, compared to me, everyone's young, so that's just relative, it might not mean a whole lot. But check Will out. Again, there'll be a link down below so you can see his channel. Now today's project is this. It incorporates a little bit of CNC work. Don't worry, not too much, and I just give you a brief glimpse of what I did with that. Then we'll carry on with the wood turning. This is not even what I really had in mind to come up with, but I had a couple of those design opportunities that we're always just so anxious to have. So I hope you'll stick around. This is a longer video than I usually like to do, but there's a lot of stuff to cover. So I hope you'll hang in there, and let's get to work. I glued two pieces of scrap plywood together and cut this disc. This disc is the same diameter as the inside of this groove. So now I'm going to set this aside, and I have waxed the living heck out of this disc around the edges and this board so that the glue will hopefully not stick to any of it. Now I'm going to take hose clamps, I've got two stuck together, and put this inside, which sometimes is a little difficult. I didn't put plastic around this because it's just a real pain to try to get it to stay where you want it. So I'm going to put this in here. Tighten up this clamp, making sure that these are down. I'm going to put a second clamp around here to hold the top of this, and of course there'll be glue between these two pieces, but I'll do that off of camera. It's messy and will probably take me a little while. Alright, I'll let the glue dry. I'll re-wax this area. I'll be ready to put on another 3 of these slots on here. Well, I have the first 5 rings glued together now. I did 3 because they're a little unmanageable trying to do all 6 with glue on them. Now to put the 6th one on, just need my hose clamps on here. And I just squeeze it in between the hose clamp and the rings. Put it in the right position. Eventually. Has a mind of its own when they're this thin. And then tighten up 2 clamps on here. With glue in between here, of course. So I'm going to glue the 6th one on. Probably off camera. And then I will be back. My usual rule is to glue both sides, both pieces of wood that I'm gluing together. But this is just messy enough already. And so I'm just doing one side with plenty of glue. I think that'll work just fine. It has so far. But of course the one that I'm recording is going to be the one that's going to be tough to do. Alright, I'll just clean up some of this excess glue and I can get to work on the others. The other 3 are coming along. I've just got 3 on this one and this one. This one also has 5, so I've almost finished it. And when they're all finished, I'll be back. I have the 4 rings ready to go in now. I'm going to make sure that the ends are beyond the edges of these arcs. I'm going to shift each one around so that there's always at least 3 rings on each of these arcs for strength. So when I get all 4 of these in here and glued, it should be plenty strong, and then I can go to the lathe. Now I'm going to be using Bessie clamps to do this, and I'm going to start with just the smallest ring. And the reason for that is that after it's glued in, I want to be able to come in here and cut this out before I put it on the lathe. And if these other 3 are in, they're just going to be in the way. Now the one problem I have with the Bessie clamps is that they are not long enough to come into that small ring. They just don't quite reach. So what I'm going to do is put this largest circle on top of there and clamp it down real tight after I get this driven in there. After the glue dries, I'll take that off, cut these out, and do the next one. So there's a little time involved waiting for glue to dry. And when I do put in the second one and the consequent ones, my Bessie clamps will reach far enough that I can just clamp down directly on them. And I've made them wider than this groove is, just to make sure that I have the ability to clamp it down. So I'll be right back. All right, I'll just let it sit there, let the glue dry for probably a half hour, and then I'll do the next one. All right, that's going to take a fair amount of sanding. I think it'll be a lot easier when it's open on both sides. I'll be able to just put a strip of sandpaper in here and slide it back and forth, sanding everything along here. So now I'll put the next one in. (1,000 RPM), it's running pretty smooth. Alright, got another disc about 1 inch thick to use at some point in the future. Now to see what I can do to clean this up. Well, I'm sorry my one camera quit working. I guess it's a good thing I had two going, but naturally the one that would have shown you the better view here is the one that quit. Anyway, one thing about using a reciprocating saw, it is not a precision tool. Especially when you're using a 12-inch blade, it just goes out there and goes wherever it wants to go. And it actually came in here and trimmed off the end of my woodworm screw. Not enough to wreck it, but it's done it. Anyway, I've made a spacer to go behind this piece against the jaws. I'll put that on and I'll be right back to show you how I'm going to carry on now that I have this lovely design opportunity. Alright, so this is set back 1/4 inch now, giving me some space. First thing I want to do is flatten this part, at least from here, and then figure out what I'm going to do in the center. I'll be turning this at 1000 RPM with my 3/8 inch bowl gouge. Now, had this not gone right through, my intention was to leave it and slope this away. But now that it's done that, and I don't like that hole being there, I have to spend a little time figuring out what I'm going to do with this. I'll be back. Alright, I've got this as flat as I can get it, and I've cut this small piece of walnut that I'm going to glue on there. I'm just going to use my tailstock, add some pressure with the live center, some glue on there, and I'm going to let it sit for quite a while, and then I want to trim this down. I'd like it to be inside of these curves that I've made here and make it a little thinner. I'm still debating on whether to leave this as a tenon or if I should use a mortise in there. We'll have to see how much meat we've got outside of the smallest mortise that I could use, which is about 2 inches. So I'll glue that on and I'll be back. Even at 2000 RPM, I'm getting some severe chipping out here. I'm going to have to do some scraping. It's still a little larger than I want it to be because it's coming into these curves that I put here. But I can't take too much off or it's going to weaken this so much. So I'm going to try tapering it in a little bit from the outside. It's right on the edge of them, so I'm going to leave it there like that. I'm going to raise this to 2000 RPM, see if that gives me a smoother cut. I'm keeping my handle down real low, making sure that I'm shear cutting instead of shear scraping. And that is starting to come along there. Using the spindle gouge. And that's what happens when you let the tip of your spindle gouge dig in. I have to go off camera there for just a second. Okay, so now I get to come out here, take this back in a little further. See if I can fix this up here. Good thing I still got a little thickness to this piece. Alright, it's sanded to 400 grit here now. I haven't bothered with this area because unless things don't work out well again, I plan to take that off. So now I'm going to reverse this. I've got this dovetail in here. I'm going to put it on my chuck and I'm really hoping this is strong enough, but I won't put great pressure on it. I'll make sure my tools are sharp to turn the other side. 1000 RPM. This is so light. It amazed me when I took it off. I'm going to make it a little lighter taking this off too. This right here is 1/4 of an inch thick, and the challenge is going to be to maintain that thickness all the way down. because this is so thin and so far out from center, it's starting to flex. I can see it, I can feel it, especially in this open area. So I think what I better do is just remove this walnut, leave as much meat in here as there is, and then sand this outside part. It's just going to start to flex more and more as I get further in here if I keep making it thin. Alright, time to sand at least this much. Lots of flex there. Alright, this area is sanded to 400 and feels great. But I am really not happy with this one right here. That's just too large a gap. And funny thing, it's only on this side. The other side is fine. So I'm going to take this off, fill that with CA glue and walnut dust, and I'll be back. Alright, fill that gap with dust. Now I'll resand this, see what I end up with. Alright, I took it back to 150. Now I'll go again up to 400. Alright, this is sanded back to 400 now. One thing about using CA glue and sawdust, it always makes it darker. But I prefer that being darker to having that gap that was there. Normally, when turning something this thin, I would like to put my hand behind it for a little support and just use my right hand to use the gouge. But I can't do that unless I'm real tired of my fingers being in the shape they're in. So I'm just going to do a little more shear cutting on here. Try turning this down past this piece of walnut and then sand down to here. Sand it to 400 now, at least this much. Alright, I still need to thin this out a little more from here. It's just getting a little bit wider right from there. Considering how much vibration I'm getting in here, how thin this is, and how light a cuts I need to take, I decided to take this to the Tormek and sharpen it again. When making cuts this light, I don't want a sharp tool, I want it to be scary sharp. And I'm hoping that's what it's at now. Yep, that's definitely an improvement. All right, it's thin enough to there now. In fact, all the way down to here. I'm going to just let it come out a little bit. I don't want to get it too thin. All right, I'm just going to sand the rest of the whole thing, and then I'll be back. Okay, got it reversed here into the coal jaws. I don't know if this is going to show up, but there's a fair amount of flex in the middle there. It's out about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch from the plate. This was not meant to be flat. So we'll have to see how this works. Now, The maximum recommended speed for these coal jaws is 600 RPM. So that's what I've got it set at right now. And let's just see what that flex does. Alright, that's pretty flat across there. I'm going to get that 2-inch sanding pad on the drill back out, sand this, and then I'll be back. Alright, the distance from this face to the back of that logo coin in there is just over 1/16 of an inch. And I just want to make some kind of a plug here, so I've created this, so I think it's 5/8 of an inch, defined it with my skew chisel. Now I'm going to try cleaning that out just a little bit with my 1/4 inch spindle gouge. I'm going to run this in reverse to try to get up to that line. Alright, that should be deep enough just to put a little glue in there and put a plug. Let me go create a plug and I'll be back. This piece of walnut I've got it sandwiched between the spindle and my live center, just a friction fit. It's 3/8 of an inch thick. It was 1.25 inches square, although I've rounded the corners off on a sander. And now I want to take it down to that circle I've drawn, which I believe is going to fit into that small recess I made. And I do not want this to be very deep. After all, that's only about 1/16 of an inch. So I'm just going to round this off and then see what I can do to make that fit. I'll have to take this off here a few times likely. And I don't want to turn very far in this way because I do not want to hit the spindle. Alright, I've turned that with just a little bit to fit into that recess. Fits in there nicely. Just going to put a few drops of glue around the outside of that piece. Just on a toothpick. I do not want too much. Then I will put the tail stalk up there to add pressure. Keep it in place. And I'll be back in an hour or two to work on this. Make sure it's got plenty of time to set. I hope that's not so much glue that it's going to come squeezing out the side. We'll see about that. All right, that should be enough pressure, and I will be back. All right, sand that up and it's going to be finished. Well, if you stuck with me to this point, I'm amazed. I wouldn't want to listen to me for this long. Anyway, this is how it turned out. I'm fairly pleased with it. Due to those few design opportunities, it's a little different than I had in mind, but I still like it. So, since this is not something I'm going to do a friction finish on, I'm just going to use mineral oil. I like the way it darkens the walnut, makes some of the figure pop occasionally, and I hope it's going to do that this time. Oh, it's doing a nice job on the walnut already. But you've already seen this at the beginning, and I'll probably throw a picture or two up at the end. So I just want to thank you for sticking around. I want to thank those who subscribed. I really appreciate the support. If you haven't done that, I hope you'll consider doing the same thing. Feel free to share this with others if you like. And I hope you'll come back next time. Thanks again for being here. You have a great day in your shop and be safe. Take care now.